At the end of October 1991, a small group of scientists was preparing for an ambitious task. They had to make their way deep inside the remains of Chernobyl Reactor 4 and place a special detection card as close as possible to its destroyed core. The result of this operation remains unique to this day. This is its story. Last week we showed you the original footage of this operation. But today we'll take a closer look at how it was done and what this strange journey inside Reactor 4 was actually meant to find. Because 5 years after the disaster, one major question was still not fully answered. How much nuclear fuel actually remained inside the destroyed reactor? You may ask, why was this so important? Well, the answer defined how dangerous the sarcophagus really was, what processes could still happen inside, and what could be done with the structure in the future. The problem was that after the sarcophagus covered Reactor 4, it also turned this destroyed unit into basically uncharted territory. Some places inside were extremely radioactive, but some were just physically inaccessible because of debris or concrete. And under these conditions, scientists had to find where exactly the fuel had gone. And that took years to answer. You may remember from previous episodes that already 1 year after the disaster, researchers began drilling into the sarcophagus to reach those inaccessible areas. Or the impressive surveys of Konstantin Checherov's group, who entered such places that almost no one else even risked to reach. But even after all this work, there still remain some areas that were just technically very difficult to study. One of them was Shield Ye, also known by its nickname, Elena. It was a giant, nearly 2,000 tons heavy biological shield that once covered the reactor from above. The thing is, after the explosion, hundreds of wrecked reactor channels remained attached to it, and inside them there were still uranium fuel pellets. The problem, however, was that the radiation levels around were simply astronomical, starting from roughly 1 sievert per hour and often much more. At levels like this, a person could work only for a very short time before the received dose becomes far too high. And there came a solution, a motorized cart equipped with a video camera and a special collimated detector. Its task was to approach Elena, scan the wreckage of reactor channels and help estimate how much fuel still remained inside them. So, who were these people who actually made it? Well, if you have followed our channel for a long time, some of them may look oddly familiar, and that's right, because you could already see them in another video. This was their walk through the infamous Red Forest, where they inspected an experimental plot with radiation-damaged pine trees. And after watching that video, many viewers were really surprised of how calmly they moved through a place that actually remains pretty dangerous even today. I must say, that impression was completely correct. There remained this faded Polaroid picture. It was taken in Chernobyl in 1986, and here we can see the same people. They were physicists from the Radium Institute: Boris Petrov, Leonid Pleskachevsky, Alexander Prusakov, and Georgy Boykov. For their entire careers, they worked with nuclear materials, reactors, and radiation measurements. And so in 1986 their experience became truly invaluable. A large operative group from the institute was sent to the disaster zone, and there, together with their colleagues, they operated a radiometric laboratory in the city of Chernobyl. If you have been to the zone, you have probably seen this building. It stands in the very center of the city, opposite the Palace of Culture, the place of the infamous Chernobyl trial. And together with colleagues from other institutes, these people carried out critical research projects you may also remember from previous episodes. There was the cableway which moved the detection basket over the reactor crater to study radioactive aerosols rising from the destroyed unit. There was also the gamma scanner, an evolution of the gamma visor that was a sophisticated device that could literally see radiation and show it on a screen. Using it, they made a detailed map of lava-like fuel-containing materials in the bubbler pool directly beneath the destroyed reactor. And yet, 5 years after the disaster, the main picture was still incomplete, and so their experience with gamma scanners became invaluable. This little stairwell became their makeshift operator's room. It's located here, at the very edge of the deaerator stack. The distance to the reactor core was significant, so the radiation levels here were rather acceptable. And yet, even here, precautions were really necessary, so all equipment was wrapped in plastic to prevent accidental surface contamination. The camera was protected as well, although we cannot see it. The man behind the camera was the fifth team member, Sergei Jilovyan from the Chornobyl Institute of Nuclear Energy, and he would follow the team for almost all their entire way. Upon exiting the stairwell, they made a brief test. Well, unfortunately, although the cart had wheels, they could be used only at the very final stage of the journey. The reason is, what was ahead was literally impossible for any kind of machine, so that meant that most of the way the team had to disconnect the cable and just carry the cart by hand. And in this fragment we can see the design of the cart closely. So it had two independent electric motors that powered the rear wheels. Those wheels appeared to be from a children's bicycle. They were lightweight, but most importantly they had solid tires, so they could not be punctured. The camera and detector were located at the front on a shared rotating mount controlled by a separate motor, so they would always look at the same direction. This detector, hidden inside that lead sphere, was quite unusual. At the very center it had a tiny semiconductor sensor, just 5 mm wide, but it was very sensitive. The massive shield around it had a system of narrow holes. They allowed gamma rays to reach the detector only from one chosen direction, filtering out everything unnecessary. So in simpler words, the device worked almost like some sort of radiation telescope that could be aimed at a specific part of the reactor wreckage. The route they had to take with it was quite complex, by wooden bridges inside the deaerator stack towards this area. In the footage it's not really visible because of the darkness, but older images give a good perspective. The bridges led to this newly concreted pod. There was a support of the mammoth beam of the sarcophagus. Behind it was a makeshift ladder, and they needed to climb it to reach what had once been the ceiling of the southern drum separator holes. And approximately here was the destination point. From this place, the detector could see Elena in front of it and focus on its channels. Before that, they had made multiple surveys to plan the time and the doses. But there is a strict rule in Chernobyl based on basic common sense. When the actual work starts, the first person to go is always someone with a dosimeter. There must be this final checkup. And Boris Petrov decided to do this job, so on video he gradually inspects this first part of the route. The metal structure is that mammoth beam support I mentioned before. This is what it looked like once the support was installed. Compared to the area above the drum separator's hole, this part was still relatively okay, so he returns and says that he didn't find anything greater than 30 roentgens, that's approximately 300 millisieverts per hour. And with this news they start to unroll the cable. The cable was really long, about 150 meters, which is nearly 500 feet. And it contained power and data lines and also a coaxial cable for the video feed, so you can imagine how heavy it was. Yet it was nothing compared to the cart itself, because use of lead shields and detector made it really heavy. According to the memories of Leonid Pleskachevsky, it was something around 50 to 60 kilograms, which is around 120 pounds. And they needed to carry it most of the way just by hand, because there were so many obstacles that no machine ever would pass them. Next, they had to lift this cart up this shaky ladder, and this is exactly where this image was taken. On the left is Alexander Prusakov, and next to him is Leonid Pleskachevsky. They attached ropes to the cart, and two teams members could pull it from the top while others were lifting. It was not easy, but it looks it worked on the first attempt. The area above had once been an interfloor ceiling of the southern drum separator hole, but now it became a very challenging terrain. You probably already noticed those white flashes of radiation. Those appear only levels are really high, and here they often reached about 1 sievert per hour. The footage is quite dark, so let's combine it with this image. It is this area, and we can spot a few reference objects. What follows is barely passable field of debris, and the installation spot was here, at the very edge of the reactor central hall. In 1986, based on the measurements the same group made, a few massive LED panels had been placed there using debug cranes, so now this became the optimal place for this detector. And so the group advances towards that place. At this point it was decided that Sergei Gilovyan would not go with them, because he was really afraid that high radiation could damage the camera, so he followed them with the zoom lens. The installation itself was quick, and it took just a few minutes. And then the team returned to the operator's room. The equipment installed here was rather standard for various nuclear-related tasks. That long cable from the card was connected to a chain of devices: an amplifier, a discriminator, an analog to digital converter, then a pulse analyzer, and finally a one-channel counter. That counter is exactly that device with those Nixie tube digits. Additionally, they had a video feed on a small monitor and a milliammeter that indicated the angle at which the detector was aimed. The detector had a 7-degree field of view, so given the distance it could capture gamma radiation from a chosen circular area of around 2 meters in diameter. Originally they had hoped they would be able to get spectrometry data, but the extreme radiation levels in that place made it virtually impossible. So as a plan B, by pointing at the specific channels, they could get raw pulse readings. At some point they had to stop, because there were simply not enough light to properly see the scanned area. So a bit later, Leonid Pleskachevsky together with Konstantin Checherov went there again to install these extra light sources. This time it took far longer, around half an hour, and that gave them doses of around 50 rangens. According to their memories, this didn't pass without consequences. In total, the scanning took around a week, and it was finished by December 1991. Then the data underwent very complex mathematical processing and resulted in this detailed map of Elena. Based on the isolines of these counts, they concluded that the amount of fuel inside was from 10 to 36 tons. The cart itself was never meant to return and remained in place. However, according to memories, Artur Korneyev, whom you surely remember from this famous image next to the elephant's foot, wanted to use a part of it for some other experiments. Well, whether that actually happened, we unfortunately do not know. This was just one of multiple operations that this talented team of physicists carried out over the years, and as you can imagine, it took its toll. As for 2026, Leonid Pleskachevsky remains the only witness of this operation. He is now 80, and thanks to him, this story was actually saved. And here I would like to say something rather important. This footage by Sergei Gilovyan is a rare case where we can see how this kind of work was actually done. You see, there is even a report about it, and there you can read very different things, such as the cart approached Elena by itself, and only when needed manpower was used. The report was written by Alexander Borovoi from the Kurchatov Comprehensive Expedition, which 5 years after the disaster provided scientific guidance for such work. However, Borovoi himself never went to places like this, and he didn't see the situation the team faced. And that's a good example how many details about works in Chernobyl are actually lost. But some, like details about this story, are luckily not. If you liked this video, do not forget to subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. Bonus content as well as our unique research materials you can find on our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next one.